Evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches, Menachos, Daf Mem Dalid. Yes, that's correct. And we're starting about 7 or 8 lines into the middle width lines, about 15 lines from the bottom of the page on Mem Gimel Amud Beis, and we're going to be finishing up the sugyas today about tzitzis and tefillin, and excitedly we'll get back into sugyas about Menachos. Reserve your applause for later. So the Gemara says like this: Tanya, Haya Reb Meir Omer, Man Ishtana Tcheles Mikol Mine Tzivonin. What is the difference between the color of tcheles from all other colors? Mipnei she'atcheles dome liyam. This color of blue, this particular shade, reminds us of the yam. V'yam dome l'rakia. V'rakia l'kisei hakadosh. Remember, v'sachas raglov k'masei lidnas ha'sapir ch'etzem ha'shamayim l'tor. The sapir, the sapphire, is of a certain color. B'chsiv k'mareh even sapir t'mos kisei reminds us, of course, of the kisei hakadosh. The Gemara then says another brisa. Tanya, this is for those who may not yet be very careful with their tzitzis. They should be. There's a bigger punishment with not wearing the white strings than there is for not wearing the blue strings. Why would that be? There was a king, and he said to two of his servants, please bring me a chosam, a signature that's in clay. And another one, he said, I want to see the impression of your ring, the signet, in gold. They both failed. The one who was supposed to get the signet pressed into clay, he failed. The one who was supposed to press the signet into gold, and he failed. Who gets a bigger punishment? So have Omer, I would just go outside, take some dirt, take some water, make some clay. It's easy to come by. So where we live, you go down this block on Tui, you go to Kasher, you buy a pair of tzitzis. Like, it's not hard, unless you have zero money. And even then, it's so much cheaper than tcheles. So the din, as for shalom, that a person would have for not being cautious with tzitzis, you get a much bigger punishment for not wearing the white tzitzis than you do for not wearing tcheles. So one obviously should be careful. Tanya, 6 lines, 5 lines from the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Beis. Out of context, but nevertheless, the Gemara here tells us about a very important halacha that we should try and make 100 brachos a day. Now, our Shmona Esrei during the week, are 19 brachos each, even though we call it Shmona Esrei, V'lam Shinim was added by Shmuel HaKatan. So 19 times 3 is 57. It's not that hard. Birchos HaShachar is 15. It's not hard to get there. You have to basically go to davening. I thought we saw it in one other place.
This is it up there. I don't see it.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah. I did think we had learned it elsewhere because the drush is so clear in my head. I just don't know if it's because it's like
You hear it, yeah. Maybe
I heard it 1,000 times. But
I don't.
I would have thought also.
Thought too. That's why I was looking.
I had the same instinct to see if this was quoted there, but I did not see that. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, anyways, 100 brachos. What's the Maramakom? Shenamar bata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoel meimach. The Gemara doesn't even bother to tell us how the darshaning works, but the word ma is similar to the word meya. That is how we get to bata. Ma meya bata Yisrael meya Hashem Elokecha shoel meimach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asking you for 100 brachos, and that's what Rashi says. 15 lines from the bottom. Ma Hashem Elokecha b'gomer kari be meya. That's 100. And how do we do that? Let's just think about Shabbos. On Shabbos, there are only 7 brachos in Shmona Esrei, right? We have the first 3, the last 3, and the middle brachos for Kedushas Shabbos. So instead of Shmona Esrei over the course of a weekday being 57 at a minimum, the Shmona Esreis on Shabbos are 21. You're way set back. So how do you hit Mea brachos b'chol yom? So says the Gemara, what Rav Chia Breder of Avia would do b'Shabbos of Yom Taveh, even on Yontif, where perhaps you have another extra bracha, Yom Kippur, whatever the case may be, you have 3 brachas on Yom Kippur, and even under the best of circumstances on a non-weekday, it's still not geshmak in regards to numbers. So Tarach u'mamale lehu be'isparmiki umagdi. Let's take a look at Rashi. Be'isparmiki umagdi. Rashi says 12 lines from the bottom of the page, Isparmiki Magdi, Isparmiki Besamim, that people would get tabak, they'd get these spices. Sometimes we have them in our shul as well. People pass them around. It's actually not pasha. The one that I actually saw floating around shul has a mixture of different kinds of brachos, which is not so pasha because one of them is borei midei besamim, like the cloves, and one of them is borei isvei besamim, like leaves or dried out. Those. So you have to ask your local Orthodox rabbi, should you separate them? Do you make two brachos on the same thing? It's impossible to distinguish the smells from one another. Okay, fine. And Rashi finishes off, shetu'unin bracha, that these things all require brachos. So we kind of need to count. We need to keep a tally, and on Shabbos it's not so pasha to do so. The Mishnah Brura early on in Orach Chaim actually makes a count. He assumes you go to the bathroom 6 times a day. He assumes that you you say Birkas Hamazon a couple times a day. You can't be gluten free and hit it easy. You gotta gotta be packing in the brachos. It's really not pasha. Even during the week, sometimes if you're not a big eater, if you're not a foodie, if you're not a big snacker, it's hard to hit it. Okay, 15 plus 57 is 72. You go to the bathroom 5 times, it's 77. Baruch Shamar Yishtabach, a couple of others, you're at 80. You gotta try. Yeah, you gotta try. I'm saying 20 brachos, or you get bracha Rishona, bracha Achrona. How many times do we eat? But on Shabbos, it's like a lift. You really gotta try very hard. 3 lines from the bottom, Tanya. Hay Reb Meir Omer. Chayv Adam levarach shalosh brachos b'chol yom. Speaking of birchos hashachar, there are 3 brachos we should make every day. Eluhein shasa'ani Yisrael. And over here, if you look on the side, it said shelo asani goy, but it was removed by the censors. That's what it says. Shahanusach shelefanenu hu mehatzenzor. That's what it says on the side here. Do you have that in the old one?
No, you don't have to change.
Yeah. It says here in the Ayin Hashlamos, I guess in the back of it, not only do they have this change, but I'm sure there's a whole Torah here. Instead of saying Shelo Asani Goy, which is what we say, it says it's Sha'asani Yisrael. It also says Shelo Asa'ani Isha and Shelo Asa'ani Bur. Thank you for not making me. Thank you for making me a Yisrael, or for not making me a Goy. Thank you for not making me a woman, and thank you for not making me a Bur. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Shamei Lebrei heard his son davening, Davakum Avarch Shelo Asani Bur. Amar Lekuli Hai Nami. This is how you daven. Well, that's not a nice way to say things. Amar Lev Elamai Mavarch. What do you want me to do instead? I don't want to be like a bore. What should I say? So he said, Shelo Asani Evet, and that's Kataka how we paskin. It's very interesting. There's a machlokas aposkim. If you say these brachos out of order, if you're allowed to go back and say the ones you missed. Why is that? Because some of the mefarshim hold that these 3 brachos are actually in the order of least observant to most observant. Shelo asani goy, shelo asani eved, shelo asani isha. Thank you for not making me a guy who only has 7 mitzvos. Thank you for not making me an isha who has no mitzvos as isha as man grama. Thank you for not. So they're in order. So if you go out of order, can you go back and say that one? That's a diyun in the poskim, actually. Okay. So the Gemara says, well, I don't understand. He says to his father, if you want me to say shelo sani evet hainu isha, they both are pater for mitzvos as isha as man grama. Says the Gemara, eved ziltfe. The eved is actually lower. Rashi, afilu hakan mezul zal ha'eved yoser mina isha. A woman has standing in the community. They run our homes. We're not in charge. I think everyone can agree that we're not in charge, right? Women run, but an eved, they have like a hierarchical ranking that's lower, obviously. What? Zal zal ha'eved yoser mina isha. Oh. Lesh nachrina zil tfei zil v'hosiv. Oh. Mm-mm. Let's continue. Nothing to look at over here. Nothing to look at. Wowzers. I didn't see that, Rashi. Okay, says the Gemara on the top of Mem Dalad Tanur Rabbanon Chilazon. The body of the chilazon, the color, Zed Gufo Dome Liyam. It actually had a bluish color to it. Ubriaso, its shape was Dome Ledag. Big diyun in the poskim. From Rishonim to Achronim as to what this animal looks like. It's not so pashut. Why did you call it that it's Dome Ledag? Is it shaped like that, like a fish, like long with a wider body? Like what does it actually look like? We now know that the chilazon is a mollusk of sorts, kind of like one of those things that will attach itself to the side of of a building for decades, So the Gemara says that whatever the shape is, we know it as the chilazon of today, which is this mollusk type of thing. Va'ole echad l'shivim shana. Once in 70 years, Rashi says it would come up on the ground out of the water. Ubidamo with its, it says damo, which is blood. Obviously, it means ink. Tsovin tcheles. That's how you die. Tcheles lefichach dam of yikarim. Because of its rarity, so therefore supply and demand is therefore very expensive. 3 lines down, Tanurabban and Amar Reb Nasan, Ein l'chal kol mitzvah kala sheksuva b'Torah she'ein matan schar ba'olam hazeh. U'olam haba ein yodea kama. There is no mitzvah, even the smallest of mitzvahs that's written in Chumash that doesn't have reward in this world. And in the next world, I have no idea how much it is. Now, I have a little bit of a girsa change on the size, according to some approaches here, where it's ba'olam hazeh u'be'olam haba, and then the kama. So let's read it in both ways. She'ein matan schara ba'olam hazeh, kama, and l'olam haba eini yodea kama. In the next world, I have no idea how much. Or, what probably is the case, she'ein matan schara ba'olam hazeh v'olam haba. Of course, you're going to get reward in both worlds. However, eini yodea kama. I don't know in either of those worlds how much it is. 2 different ways. But there are no mitzvos that are in the Torah that we don't get rewarded in this world and in the next. And the Gemara tells a nearly graphic story about this. The Gemara says as follows: Tzei ulamad mi mitzvah tzitzis. There was a man, he was exceedingly careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis. Kamuvan, as we'll soon see, he wasn't careful with all mitzvahs. Shama sheyesh zona bekirchei hayam. He heard that there was a woman who was selling her services, and she lived down on the islands. Shenoteles, and her cost for her time and for what she would do was dalad meos zehuvim bischara. It was 400 golden coins. So this man at a big Yetzirah, Shigir la arba meo zehuvim v'kaval azman. He paid the 400 zehuvim, and he set aside that he was going to be together with this woman. Sheigi azmano, when the time came, Bavi Yashav ala Pesach, he came to her home in the islands, and he sat by the door. Nichnasa shivchasa, the maidservant who worked for this woman, she said, "V'amrallah," she said to the zona, "Osa adam sheshigir lich daled meo zehuvim b'aviyashav ala Pesach." The man who paid you in advance for 400 zehuvim, he's at the door. So Amrahi yikaning, she said to her maidservant, "Go tell him he's allowed to enter the building." Nichnas, the man entered into the home of the zona. Hitzia la zayin mito. She had set aside 7 different beds. Sheish shel kesef, 6 of them were silver. Ve'achas shel zahav, and 1 of them was gold. Ubein kol achas ve'achas sulam shel kesef, and there were silver ladders that connected 1 bed to the next. So I guess 7 beds, 3 silver on one side, 3 silver on another, and at the topmost bed ve'elyona shel zahav, some type of structure like that. She went and sat on the topmost bed unclothed. He was planning on doing the same thing, of being there on the top bed without any clothes on. But while he was disrobing, while he was getting undressed, the 4 corners, the 4 strings of his tzitzis bumped him in the face, all 4 strings. So he couldn't escape it. Or Isa Moso Schartam, he couldn't escape it. Nishmat, he went down the ladder. V'yashav lo al gabe karka, and sat down on the ground. V'avhi nishmata v'yashav al gabe karka. She too, she came down from the bed that she was sitting on, and she also sat down on the ground. Amar Allah gapa shel Romi. This is like a language of Shvua, the masters of Rome. She'eni manichascha ad shete amerli mamum ro'isbi. What's wrong with me? Why do you not want to be with me? What flaw, she said, do you see in me? Hamarla ha'avoda, also a lashon of Shavua. Shelo ra'isi isha yafa kamoscha. I've never seen anyone more beautiful than you. El mitzvah achas tzivoni Hashem Elokeinu. But there is one particular mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded me. V'tzitzis shema. And the name of the commandment is tzitzis. V'kasuv ba nima ani Hashem Elokechem shtei pa'amim. And we say the pasuk, in the pasuk, Ani Hashem Elokechem, we say those words twice. And there's a drasha on each of those references of Ani Hashem Elokechem. The first time it says that is Ani hu she'asid li para. The first time it says Ani Hashem Elokechem, it reminds us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who metes out punishments. And the second time it says Ani Hashem Elokechem is V'ani hu she'asid li shalem schar. And if I do the right thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to dole out the appropriate schar that is due to me for my self-discipline. Achshav nidmu alai kedalet edim. These four corners are functioning right now as four witnesses to me. I can't do this avera, but it's not because of a lack of beauty. It's not because you have a mum. It's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the mitzvah of tzitzis. Be'ashgacha pratis, it hit me square in the face, and because of that, I'm not able to perform this avera. Halfway down on Mem Dal and Ralph, the story continues. Amr lo, she said, Eini manichoscha, I'm not letting you go. Ad shete Amr li, mashimcha, please tell me your name. Umashem ircha, what city do you live in? Umashem rabcha, who is your rebbe? Umashem midrashcha, what's the name of the base medrash that you learn at? Sha'ata lamed bo Torah. So he's like, I guess, I don't know why you want it, but sure. So kasav v'nasan biyada, he did. He gave it to her. Amda, at that time, she stood up. So then she decided, I don't want this anymore. He really inspired me, and I'm going to convert to Judaism. She gave a third of her monies to the Malchus, a third of her monies to poor people. The only thing that she didn't sell were the beds. Chutz me'osan matzos, except for the beds, the sheets that she had prepared for this man. Then the next part of the story is Ubas the Beis Midrash Shel Rav Achia. It's not Rav Chia, but Rav Achia. That was his name. She went to the Beis Midrash where this man who had pursued her in the first place was learning. Amr lo, she said to the Rebbe, Tzave alai v'yasuni gerus. I want you to include me and make me into a giores. Literally, command upon me, but help me go through the process of converting. So the Gemara says as follows: Amar lo, Biti, my daughter, Shema einayich nosat be'echad min talmidim. Maybe you have an ulterior motive. Maybe the reason why you want to convert is because you saw one of the Erlich, a younger man who's learning in the Beis Medrash, and you want to marry him. And we have a discussion in Poskim. This is real. If a woman is converting, or if a man is converting to Judaism, only for the sake of marriage, do we view that ulterior motive as a psul in the gerus? Do we allow for someone to convert if their intentions aren't fully real? Big discussions. Okay. So she said, Hotzia ksav, well, she didn't say, the story continues, Hotzia ksav miyadav and asnalo. She had written up her whole gerus story, and she gave it to the Rav. He read it. Amar la, L'chi zachi b'mekchech. Go and be zoche, go and merit your purchase. In other words,
She took out his page. Probably his page, his resume that he wrote up, no?
no, Rashi, third of the way down, Hotzia ksav miyada. She took out a writing from her pocket. V'safra la, kol ha'me'ora, shel Hashem shamayim. He told the whole story, everything Hashem shamayim is kayeres. The fisha shama neis gadol shel chomer mitzvah shetavchu lo. So she told the story. It seems like he didn't write that down. All she had, yeah, but she wrote down. See, she seemingly wrote down the story. Why does this Rashi say V'safra? Maybe she handed the paper that he had, and then she also told the story.
This is why I have this information.
But the Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says that all that happened was she gave him a piece of paper. But Rashi adds in. Rashi says I don't quite know. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, either way, she conveyed to Reb Achia that she was L'Shem Shamayim, and he said no problem. And then Osan Matzos she'itzia lo be'isr, hitzia lo be'heter. And then B'ashgacha Pratis, the mitos that she had planned to do an Aveira with, now the tables had turned. She was Miskayeres. She married this single guy in Kola, working on the Shidduch crisis, and all of a sudden, all is fine and good. They get married. So says the Gemara, Zeh matan tzchara ba'olam hazeh, ula olam haba ini yodea kama. Again, where do you put the comma? Do you put the comma? That was confusing because comma and comma. There's comma at the end of the verse. I didn't mean for that. Sorry. Zeh matan tzchar ba'olam hazeh. Perhaps there's a comma there. Or ul olam haba. Perhaps there's a comma there. Ve'eni yodea comma. All right. Back in the Gemara, we are first of the long lines on Mem Dal and Mad Aleph. Amr Yehuda. Talis she'ula. If you have a four-cornered garment that's borrowed, kol shloshim yom ptura min hatzitzis. If you're only borrowing a four-cornered garment from someone and you're only doing so for less than 30 days, the halacha is that it's pater from tzitzis because it's she'ula. However, mikan va'ela chayeves. If you borrow a four-cornered garment for longer than that amount of time, so then the Gemara says you're going to be chayev. You're going to be obligated, of course, to then put on tzitzis. Tanya namihachi. We have a brisa this way: Hadar bepundaki be'eretz Yisrael, ve'asocher bayis b'chutz la'aretz. Someone who lives in a hotel in Eretz Yisrael, or someone who rents a house in chutz la'aretz, kol shloshim yom pater min hamezuzah. Mikan ve'elech chayev. If you're living in a hotel or if you're renting in chutz la'aretz. Aval asocher bayis be'eretz Yisrael. But if you're renting a home in Eretz Yisrael, we don't have the same leniency that we do in chutz la'aretz. Osa mezuzah la'altar. If you're renting in Eretz Yisrael, there is no leniency. Why? Because mishum yishuv de Eretz Yisrael. Because we want to make sure that it's more likely that when you leave that house, it will go to a yid. Rashi speaks about this a little bit more than a third of the way down. Mishum yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Tila'achar shekava. Once a person establishes a mezuzah on the doorpost, shuv eina not la misham. You're not allowed to take it down. Afilu yotze mimenu. Even if you're leaving, kedamar beperak hashol bebava mitzia. Hilkach bakoshi yetze mimenu. He's going to have a very hard time to leave that apartment. Mibnei torach mezuzah acheres, because he doesn't want to have to stare with the mezuzahs. Afilu yotze mimenu is karena acher. Mahari kishimatzen mezumeres b'mezuzah v'nimtzeis Eretz Yisrael miyushavas. It's more likely you'll rent to a yid than you'll rent to a goy because you don't want to get rid of the mezuzahs. We have these shilas in our neighborhood. If I sell my house to a yid, I have to leave the mezuzahs. Okay, a guy is buying the house, never have to take down the mezuzahs, but really that's not ideal. So the push here was that even by a rental in Eretz Yisrael, we want to make sure the mezuzahs are up. So the Chazal, even though midoraisa you're pater, but because Chazal didn't want to have a problem of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, they said that if a yid was to be socher in Eretz Yisrael, the halacha is that he would have to put up a mezuzah right away. We had said earlier in the Mishnah that tefillah shel yad eina me'akeves, that if you only have one of the tefillin, either the tefillah shel yad or shel rosh, you continue and only wear that. The Gemara says a very cryptic line, Amar Rav Chiza, lo shanu ela sheyesh lo, aval ein lo me'akeves. This is only true if you have both and you're only wearing one. But if you only have one, then you're not yotze. That's very odd. If you're yotze with one when you have two, why wouldn't you be yotze with one when you have one? It's very odd. The Gemara says, Amr lo, the Chachamim pushed back on Rechiza Amr. Did you really say that? Amr lu lo, I didn't say that. He actually did say, which will qualify in a minute. He just probably means over here, I didn't say what you think I said. So what the correction is, Elaman deles le tre mitzvos, chad mitzvah nami lo liavid. If a person doesn't have two mitzvos, he shouldn't do one. Obviously, the mitzvah of tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh are different mitzvos. We are makbid to do this. We make two brachos, afal pi, that we have this very, very, very unique scenario by tefillin, that after we say the second bracha and we're mahadek the tefillin on the head, we say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam, but as if there's some compensatory, like when you say Shem Hashem by accident, bar mitzvah boys at their bar mitzvah, they say Hashem's name 3, 4, 5 times when they stumble through a pasuk. That's a big problem. It's usher. It's completely usher. So there you're not in the middle of laning, but let's say I make a shahakal when I'm not supposed to. I say Baruch Shem Kod Malchus Olam. We built it into the structure of putting on tefillin. Very, very mechudash. So the Gemara says rhetorically, obviously, if you have two mitzvos, you should do them, and if you only have one, of course you should do it. Why is it that Reb Chizda wanted to say his line that the only time you're ever yotze wearing one of the tefillin is if you have both? Why did he want to say that? Gzer Shema Yipasha. Because let's say a person doesn't have a lot of money, but he does have a tefillin shel yad. He doesn't want to have to go buy a tefillin shel rosh. You heard the Gemara in Menachos Daf Mem Daled that you're allowed to wear only one tefillin shel yad. It's still kosher. Shema Yipasha, we're afraid that he won't go and buy the next one. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says 2/3 of the way down, Shema Yipasha, Yamina Deina Me'akeves. If we say that it's not Me'akev, then Yipasha, V'lo Yiknehu Acheres, he won't go and buy the second one. Okay. 4 lines from the bottom, Amar Rav Sheshes, Kol Shemeina Maniach Tefillin. Anyone who doesn't put on tefillin, over Bishmona Aseh, he violates 8 mitzvos Aseh, 4 for each parsha. This is a very interesting din, because the parshios and the shel yad are not separated. Nevertheless, even though they're not separate parshios, it seems to be that those are the 8. That's what Rashi says. That Dalid parshios yesh bahen. There are 4 parshios. Actually, he says a little differently. Sorry. Rashi says Dalid parshios yesh bahen. There's 4 parshios. Ve'akol chada kaime tre aseh. And with each one, there's two mitzvos aseh ukshartam laos ve'ayu latotafos. Okay, very, very interesting. You get 8 mitzvos aseh when you put it on, and you're mevatel 8 mitzvos aseh when you're done. So obviously, correct. The tustel is right. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? You get the pasuk doesn't say you have a mitzvah to wear. I mean, I guess that's what Rashi is saying. Ukshartam, the mitzvah of Yom Shema. Ukshartam by the mitzvah by the first paragraph. I guess so. Very interesting. I wonder what the Monei Mitzvot say about this because they're like sticklers. I have to say,
And shocked you found it 8 times, like it was,
there's no way.
shocked.
I have never learned the Sefer HaChinuch through. I don't know, but I just can't imagine. Can you imagine the Rambam saying, Kol HaMeniach Tefillin? I mean, it's a Gemara, obviously. The question is, what does it mean L'maisa in regards to Monei Mitzvos? The Monei Mitzvos were major sticklers, all of them. They were all okay. B'chol she'ein lo tzitzis bebigdo, anyone who wears a four-cornered garment without strings over be'chamisha aseh, they violate 5 different mitzvos aseh. Rashi, ve'asu ve'nasnu ve'haya or isem and gedilim ta'aselach. Same question I would have here, I'd have there.
Oh, we did. That each quarter actually was the shiur, each quarter was its own mitzvah.
Mhm.
We never said that by tefillin, did we? That each parsha was?
No, but I understand Rashi's point is that each paragraph is mitzvah you to tie that onto your arm. That I get, but I never understood it that way. I would have said that's one of the many that go in the box. That I'm balabataj. I mean, I don't have any teeth to what I'm saying, and I'm wrong. But it's how I would have looked at it. I would have been like, I know what they mean.
Not really Yotze with one of, if you only had one
Yeah,
part inside,
yeah.
you wouldn't be Yotze,
Correct.
right?
So it's
why
it's
would
not fully 8. Because I guess it's and they're interdependent. You like you're saying, if one doesn't have two, you're done. If two doesn't have three, you're done. You need all 4, but I guess when you have 4, it multiplies into 8.
But there are other, it's like giving tzedakah and like onas devarim, like where it says just like how many mitzvahs you're being over if you don't do it. Right? So it doesn't mean it would be counted as more than one mitzvah, but this isn't like only
That's in really
days
fair.
like that.
That's very unfair.
But what Stan is pointing out is that when the Gemara says that if you don't put on tefillin, you violate 8 mitzvos aseh.
Yeah.
By definition, that should mean if you wear them, you're fulfilling 8 mitzvos aseh.
Yeah.
That's the tzustel that Stan's making. That's
Oh, yeah.
that's a very reasonable jump. But where there's a kasha on that is that if you don't have 3 of the parshios, you don't get the mitzvah for the one parsha you have.
Ah.
If that's the only thing I put in the bottom, would I be yotze? I can't imagine you're yotze. I hope so, because then I was yotze tefillin for my bar mitzvah till I was 18. 6 out of 8. 6 out of 8. I know. Only my junior year, and only till I lost my tchelas because I maxed out my dad's credit card. So I'm paying for it today. My son came home here. He's like, "Oh, I just bought a coat." I'm like, "How much was it?" He told me almost. I'm like, "What?" Like he's like, "Well, you spend money like that." I'm like, "I make money. You're a mooch. You don't make a dime. What are we even talking about here? Like totally not normal." Anyways, I'll vent later. I'm on air here. Let's go. B'chol Kohen, says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. B'chol Kohen she'eno ola l'duchan over begimel aseh. He violates 3. Yivarechecha Hashem yishmerecha yo'er Hashem panav lecha b'chonecha. The 3 brachos yisa. B'chol she'en l'mezuzah. Oh yeah. But it's Daf Yomi. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Masking. This is where you need like an Ein Yaakov, and just to look at the Meforshim there and really just dig in a little bit. I'm sure there's a lot of beautiful Torah. Chol she'ein la mezuzah bepischo over b'shnei aseh. A person who doesn't have a mezuzah on their doorway, they violate 2 mitzvos aseh. Uchsav tem, uchsav tom. First paragraph, second paragraph. And it's similar to the tefillin theory that each of the paragraphs have a tzivui within the paragraph that obligate us to do that. So therefore, we're picking up on those tzivuyim and calling them separate mitzvos aseh, afal pi that they're interdependent. Anybody who puts on tefillin, which is all of us, maharich yomim, a person then earns lengthier days. Shne'emar, Hashem aleim yichyu, when Hashem is on you, you have longer days. Rashi, Hashem aleim osam shenosin aleim shem Hashem b'tefillin yichyu. The people who put tefillin on their heads that have a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name in them, you'll live longer. The pasuk reads in full, a pasuk from Yeshaya, Hashem Aleihem yichyu l'chol bahen chay ruche v'sachal imeni v'hachayeni. It'll make me live. That ends our divergence from the world of Zvachim and Menachos. Don't worry, we have a nice re-entry. It's not so hard. We'll stop at the Mishnah toward the bottom of the page in just a matter of minutes. When one brings a korban, a korban mincha, hasoles v'hashemen ein ma'akven es hayayin, the flour and the oil, they're not me'akev the wine, v'lo hayayin me'akvan, and wine doesn't ruin them. So we have a grouping, solas and shemen on one side and wine on another. These do not conflict with one another. That's din number one of the Mishnah. Number two, hamatanos she'ala mizbeach hachitzon, Rashi points out, Kigon dalad matanos shel chatas on the third line. Let's say we're talking about a korban that has 4 sprinklings that need to be done. Ein ma'akvos zuas zu. Rashi on the fourth line, Ein ma'akvos zuas zu she'im lo nasan ela achas kiper. Even if you only did 1 out of the 4, you are yotze. We actually spoke about this in Maseches Zvachim. Let's pick up the Gemara here. Tanu Rabbanan. Umin chasam v'niskehem. Have mincha, ve'achar kach have nesachin. The order of events should be based on the pasuk. The pasuk says in Bamidbar Chav Tes that the mincha comes first, and then the nesachin, then the libations come next. Rebbe Omer zevachu nesachim. First, a korban is brought, not the mincha, but a korban. Then the nesachim are brought. Have zevach ve'achar kach have nesachim. Ay ve'Rebbe nami haksivu min chasam v'niskehem. What do you do about the pasuk that the Tanakama used? So Rebbe explains, that when you bring a korban, and there were also mincha and nesachim aspects to them, those don't necessarily need to be brought b'shas maisa. They can be brought later that night, or even the next day. And what the pasuk of the mincha samanis gehem teaches us is not about the order in which things are brought, but that the mincha and the nesachim are allowed to be brought later. What does the Tanakama do? The Tanakama who says Havei mincha ve'achar kach havei nesachim. What does he do with the pasuk that Rebbe brings? The pasuk that Rebbe brings is zebach nesachim, which indicates that we bring the nesachim only after a shechita is done. So says the Gemara, what did the Rabbanan do with that pasuk? They need that for the pasuk of Zeiri. The Amar Zeiri ein nesachim iskachna lebeshchitas hazevach. Zeiri was of the opinion that a nisuch doesn't ever become holy. There's no sanctity of the wine until the shechita takes place, which is how he understands the pasuk of zebach nesachim. Rebbe nami mi boile lechad Zeiri. He also holds of Zeiri that nesachim are only niskadesh through zvicha. V'Rabbana nami mi boilehu leminchasam niskem balayla minchasam niskem afilu lemachar. Meaning, the 2 psukim that they use, that their counterparts learn secondary halachos from, they both need to learn both of those halachos. So we need enough mar makomos to go around. So says the Gemara, Elohainu taima derabbanan. Well, let's try again. Maybe, says the Gemara, the rabbis hold d'chsiv ola umincha. The Rebbe Nami, maybe the answer of the Rebbe of the Rabbanon is that it says Ola first and then Mincha. So it says the Gemara, Rebbe Nami Aksiv Ola Mincha. What does he do with it? Ella says the Gemara, when it comes to this case of Beboy Mimazevach, that we're talking about these extras that are brought with a korban, the Kule Alma Lo Pligi de Mincha Va'achar Kach Nesachim. Everyone agrees that if there is a shchita being done, and there's also a mincha and nesachim, that the order is mincha first and then nesachim. Dichsiv olo mincha. Ki pligi. When do the Rabbanan and Rebbe argue? Only bebayin bifnei atzman. Only when the mincha and the nesachim are being brought on their own, without an actual korban. Halfway down on Mem Daled Amud Beis. Rabbanon savre mideboin im hazevach mincha ve'achar kach nesachim. Just like when you bring a zevach, the mincha is first and then the nesachim. Bifnei atzman nami mincha ve'achar kach nesachim. The same exact thing would be true in regards to the korban mincha, that it should be in that same order. In other words, whether or not the mincha and nesachim accompany a korban, or if they're being brought on their own, it's the same order. Mincha first, nesachim second. Why would we change? The Rebbe, he says, no, hasamhu, thereby the korban da'idi da'aschil be'achila, because the zevach that we shechted is meant to be eaten. Gamar la lakula milsa de'achila, therefore you should bring the flour first. Aval bifnei atzman, but when they are on their own, nisachin adifi, hoel de misamra shira alaihu. Oh, when you're not bringing it with a korban, so then the nisachim have a leg up on the mincha, which is that when the nesachim are brought, the libations are brought, the Levium would sing at that time. That's considered an aliyah of the nesachim that places it above the mincha. I agree, says Rebbe, that if you're bringing a mincha and a nesachim that accompanies a zevach, I'm maskim. I don't argue with you. You should absolutely do that. You should bring the mincha first, followed by the nesachim. But when you're not bringing a korban, and all you're bringing is a nesachim and a mincha, the nesachim has one leg up, which is that there's shira sung at that time, and therefore demis amr shira alaihu, that when they're brought on their own, we should do the nesachim first, and then bring the mincha. We're at the 2 dots, about 9 lines or so from the bottom of the page on Mem Daled Amud Beis. Menachos shal mizbeach hachitzon ein me'akvo zu ezu. Rashi at the top of the page had said on the Mishnah that perhaps we were discussing a case of a korban chatas that had daled matanos, and maybe you didn't do all of them right. So the Mishnah said they're not ma'akev one another. Tanu Rabbanon. Minayin l'kol hanistan al mizbeach hachitzon shenosnan b'matana achas shekiper. How do we know that even though really the ideal amount, let's use our chatas as an example, is to do 4 sprinkles, how do we know that even if you only did 1, you're still going to be yotze? Shenemar v'dam, singular, v'dam zevachecha yishafech al mizbach Hashem elokecha. That from this pasuk we see that the singular verb, singular noun, I should say, v'dam, and the blood, it doesn't say v'damim, it says v'dam. So therefore, we learn from here almost as a binyanav, almost as a broad principle, that any korbanos that are brought on the mizbeach hachitzon, you will always be yotze with 1 dam. That's why our Mishnah at the top of the page says, hamatano shal mizbeach hachitzon ein ma'akvo zu ezu. Any one of those will be sufficient to bring us to the point of being yotze with the korban. That therefore explains our Mishnah. We'll stop right here, and Amir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with another daf mem. Hey, wishing you all a beautiful night.